There we go. So, welcome everyone. Happy New Year. I think everyone's hoping that 2021 is easier than 2020 with its many, many challenges, though I have to say that 2021 is not looking particularly easy, certainly at the beginning. And of course, New Year is a time when we often sort of reflect on our priorities. We might make a New Year's resolution, or we might think, oh, that never works, you know, it backfires, then I end up feeling worse about myself 3 weeks into January because I don't manage to keep my New Year's resolution. And I was just hearing something on the Today programme, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and they were saying, oh, surely 2021 is not a year for making resolutions like not having cake or not having the wine, you know, surely we should just go easy on ourselves. And I could see why they said that, but I have to say that I fundamentally really don't agree, because a resolution should be for something that is supportive for us, something that is helpful, something that is kind, something that is wise. And actually, surely we need that now more than ever. You know, we need to cultivate good habits for ourselves more than ever before. It's in challenging circumstances that we really need to look at what we're doing and how we can support ourselves. And of course, when we're in a better place ourselves, we support others much more as well. I'm sure you're familiar with this. I notice it, you know, when I've had enough sleep and I'm eating well and I'm meditating more, everything around me goes better. You know, my work as teaching and supervising and just my personal relationships, you know, I'm even nicer to the cat when I'm in a better mood and everything is better. So it's not a question of not making New Year's resolutions or having a direction. It's a question of how to do it in a skillful way. Okay, you know, so to set a resolution, say, right, I'm going to do this, it's not enough, right? It's not enough. And the sort of risk, if we don't have some kind of direction and resolve and intention, is that we just kind of drift. And I think in the early years of Buddhism, in the 60s, I wasn't alive then, but there was a lot of like, hey, I'm not going to have any commitments, I'm not going to have any, you know, attachments, I'm just going to drift around and be really free. But actually, drifting is not freedom. Drifting actually is just being a slave to our impulses, you know, and is this really where we find any freedom? You know, I think we know that it isn't. An impulse to do this, oh, I'll follow that. Oh, an impulse to do that, oh, I'll follow that. At the end of the day, we get there and we think, oh, you know, damn it, I didn't really do what I wanted to do today. The day was just sort of lost in short-term impulses. And the Buddha was certainly not encouraging drifting. Okay, most definitely not encouraging drifting. In fact, if you look at the structure that Buddhist monastics live in, there's not much space for impulses in there. It's incredibly structured, okay, because this can be a really good container. Now, I'm not a monastic, as you can see, I'm not a monastic, but, you know, so I haven't gone quite that far. But it can be really helpful to reflect on our intention and then to put something in place to support that intention. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. So in the Eightfold Path, the second on the Eightfold Path is right intention. So I'll just say a few words about what that means. So I'll start with the words right. So this is the word that you'll see most often if you look at Dharma books. It's right, the Eightfold Path. It says right this, you know, right view, right intention, right action, right speech, right livelihood. Now, translation from the Pali, from the language of the texts, is very difficult. Right, it's a long time ago, very different culture as well. So, you know, I'm not a Pali scholar myself, but as I understand, right is probably it kind of captures one aspect of what it really means, the word sama in Pali. But another translation that I really like, that I heard from John Peacock, who is a Pali scholar, and he said it has more of a sense of harmony or harmonious, you know, like a bell. And I say that word and I hear that, and my whole body just kind of goes, like hearing a really lovely bell. And for me, that captures more of the sense of what sama means, harmonious, or wise is another one, or skillful. And the nice thing about these words is, I mean, they have opposites, obviously, but they don't have quite such a strong, stark right, wrong. Okay, you know, we have skillful, unskillful, but it's not as stark, is it? And, you know, you put your hand up at school, you're hoping to get the right answer, not the wrong answer. So I like to think of right intention more as like a wise intention, or a skillful intention, or harmonious intention. So that's one way of looking at it, and you can look at the whole Eightfold Path in this way, you know, skillful view, skillful intention, action, speech, livelihood, and the rest of them. And intentions, Sankappa in Pali, in yoga, sometimes you come across something called a Sankalpa. If you do yoga, you hear this word Sankalpa. It means intention or resolution. It's basically the same word. Okay, Pali and Sanskrit are very close to each other. And this word is usually translated as intention, also translated as thinking or thought. So right thought, right thinking. And personally I like intention more, because the thing is, in English, thinking just means kind of anything, any sort of mental activity. And as you probably know, there's a lot of different kinds of mental activity. What it means here is the kind of purpose, intention, that kind of thinking. It doesn't mean understanding, the cognition, that would be in right view, our understanding of the world and how things work. It definitely doesn't mean, you know, rumination, it doesn't mean anxiety, it doesn't mean dreaming, it doesn't mean daydreaming, it's none of that. So wise thinking is our sort of purpose, reflecting on our purpose and our intention. So the Buddha was quite big on this. This is number 2 in the Eightfold Path, the real core and the foundation of the teachings. And I think it's interesting to think, why is it number 2? Because after it we have the action ones, the action factors of right action, ethical action, right speech and right livelihood. And our intention conditions in a large way what we actually do. You know, we have an intention to be generous, we probably are then more generous. We have an intention to act ethically and kindly, we are much more likely to then do that. Without that intention, these actions are not going to happen. So that's why it's there. Okay, it's number 2, very, very important one. So what is right intention? Well, it is letting go. Renunciation is the other translation of this. Just a letting go. I like that much more. Letting go. So what are we letting go of? We're letting go of all kinds of clinging, actually. And those of you who are used to Dharma practice, familiar with the teachings, are thinking probably, oh yeah, I've heard of this before. Okay, so in many ways the whole path is about letting go. Letting go of clinging, the suffering that comes with clinging. Clinging to what? Clinging to anything, actually. Whether it's clinging to our material possessions, that's the sort of most gross and obvious way. Clinging to relationships that maybe are finished for some reason, or, you know, maybe we've lost the person, or the relationship's over. Clinging to ideas of who I want to be. Clinging to ideas of myself even as a separate entity, clinging to mind states that I would like to have. I'd love to feel really sort of calm and happy and energetic every day, but, you know, sadly I don't. Clinging to views, clinging to opinions, you know, think of how much strife we get when we cling to a view and we think, I'm right. You know, we're going to have views, obviously, but if we cling to them and are sure that we're right, it does cause an awful lot of discord. So these are the kinds of things that we cling to. Oh, and habits, that's another one. We do cling to our habits. We like to do things in a certain way, and as we find when we no longer can do them in a certain way, yeah, if we're clinging, we're going to really suffer. So any kind of clinging is going to present a problem, and there's an enormous freedom in learning to let go. And often we learn to let go by seeing the suffering of clinging that is there. But we have to intend to do this. You know, this is important. You know, our kind of default is often to cling. We feel a kind of sense of security in hanging on. You know, I don't have children myself, but as I understand, one of the first things that a baby does when they're born is that, you know, you give them a finger and they hang on, right? You know, they hang on to things. We do. So we have to learn to let go. We have to practice and we have to intend to let go. The other important thing to reflect on with right intention is this conducive to liberation? So it's not right and wrong in that way that we've been conditioned to think of. It's just, does this help me be free? You know, that's really the fundamental question of the Dharma. Does this help me to be free? Letting go will help you to be free. Honestly, try it. It really does. The other aspects of right intention, and again, they're here everywhere in the Dharma teachings, are kindness and compassion. Hey, no surprise there, right? Really. There's a lot of freedom in being kind, a lot of freedom in being compassionate. And I want to pull out the difference between kindness and compassion, because often the words are used as if they are interchangeable. And they are very close. They are very close. But they're not exactly the same thing. So kindness is a kind of global goodwill. So as I'm sitting here looking at all of your pictures, I've got you on gallery view. I'm thinking, I hope you're all really well and flourishing. I don't know very much about most of your individual circumstances. And, you know, maybe I spread that around as well. May all beings be happy. Well, that's lovely, isn't it? Compassion is what arises when goodwill, kindness, metta, meets suffering and doesn't turn away. So if one of you said, oh God, I'm having a really difficult time recently, you know, it's been really hard for me now. Kindness reaches out and says, oh, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do? So often the kind of statues that you see, particularly in the Mahayana traditions in China, Korea, Japan, the bodhisattvas of compassion are reaching out. They're getting off their cushions and they're saying, what can I do? Sometimes they're just listening, and often that's actually all we can do, is to be with someone who's suffering and to not turn away. To not turn away. We are there with them. And, you know, maybe think when you've been the one suffering, how is it when someone just listens and really gives you the space to express your suffering? But it's difficult. They don't maybe leap in to fix. They just really hear you and stay with you. And that is a compassionate thing to do. You know, it's the foundation of any kind of counselling and therapy, is first of all just to hear what the person is saying, to be there with them. So they're very closely related, but kindness is there whether you're suffering or not, and compassion is specifically for when things are suffering. And both of these are very, very conducive to liberation. Another way of thinking about the three aspects of right intention is that they kind of work against some of the poisons of the mind, which are greed, hatred and delusion. We're not particularly looking at delusion today, but clinging is countered by letting go. It's the opposite, right? You know, I hang on to something, I've got my little scrunchie, I'm hanging on. When I let go, it's the opposite, right? And kindness and compassion really are the opposites of ill will. It is not possible to wish someone well and to be kind and to say, I hope you're doing really okay today, and to harbour ill will at the same time. That just isn't possible. And the more you cultivate kindness and compassion, ill will just evaporates. They can't be there at the same time. It's like the room is dark, and the room with my office was dark. This morning when I came down to teach, turned on the light, the darkness is then gone, apart from under the table. But even there's light. So kindness and compassion shed light, and they dissipate, they dispel the ill will. So this is right intention. This is what it is, and it can be cultivated. You know, all of the Dharma is there to be understood and to be cultivated. So in case you're thinking, well, I haven't really got that at the moment, you can cultivate. You know, we are never fixed. And I think really we sort of know when intention is right. We can feel it. Okay, it's not complicated. We get a sense when our intention is, I was going to say pure. You know, we kind of know, don't we? And we know when someone else is coming to us with a good intention, even if perhaps their words were not the best thing, or maybe, you know, you didn't like the present that they gave you. But you know, if their intention is right, you know, you sort of feel it, don't you? It's not complicated. We don't need to overthink this one. There's a word often used in Dharma books, wholesome. You know, in Pali, kusala. We get a sense of that, don't we? And we also know when it's not wholesome. If we know when someone's giving us something, hoping that, you know, we then owe them one. Or conversely, if we give something to someone and we know it's not a pure gift, we're sort of thinking, yeah, now they owe me one. It doesn't sort of feel so good, does it? We sort of know. So right intention, I think, is not complicated to know. You know when it feels right. And yeah, just really go with that. So right intention is really, really important for anything. And then if we're going to make a resolution, we're going to decide to do something. So maybe you've decided to do that already, or you're sort of thinking, oh, maybe I could do this. It's important to decide on the right thing or things. Okay, you know, we can get very dogged and sort of commit to something and then think, well, actually, was that the right thing to commit to? So we need to bring some wisdom into what are we actually committing to? What is the most supportive thing for me? You know, maybe you might think, well, you know, thinking of a friend of mine recently, She said, you know, honestly, lockdown's been so difficult, I have just allowed myself to eat more cake, and that's fine, I'm just allowing myself to do that. You know, that felt like the right thing for her. Deciding on what your resolution is actually going to be is, you know, an opportunity for wisdom. What's it going to be? What's realistic? You know, that's really, really important. Being realistic. You know, I think possibly the reason a lot of New Year's resolutions fail is we're just unrealistic. You know, I heard this on this radio program I mentioned, someone said he made 8. I thought, 8? 8? Goodness, that's a lot. Surely, like, 1 is enough. You know, maybe just resolve to practice half an hour a day or something, or an hour a day if you've got more time. Or, you know, be realistic. That is wisdom, being realistic. Setting ourselves lofty goals and failing is definitely not. And what I find really helpful for looking at resolve is, the book is here. There's this list, so it's not there in the original Pali Canon, but there's a list of 10 parami. Now, parami is translated often as virtue, which I quite like, or perfections, which I like slightly less, or sometimes it's left untranslated. Basically, it's qualities to cultivate. And in the Theravada tradition, there are 10. In Mahayana, there's 6. Somehow 4 got lost along the way. And this book, which I'm going to put a link into the chat for the PDF version of this. It's a free book from Amravati Monastery, or the Thai forest tradition, by Ajahn Suchito. I find it really good. Really, really good. And one of these paramis is resolve. And as we know, to achieve anything, to go anywhere, we need some kind of resolve. Otherwise, like you were saying at the beginning, we just kind of drift around, right? We need some kind of resolve. Yeah, and I hear people say, oh, I can't do that, I've got no willpower. Well, you don't need willpower, actually. And I think willpower has been shown by psychologists to be somewhat limited. It's quite brittle. There's a lot of kind of forcing and tightness that goes with that. And that's why it doesn't work. Because we get overly tight, and then we can't keep it up. Much better to, again, just be realistic and maybe just think, well, I'll see if I can do this every day for a week. You know, it's like really one day at a time, 1 week at a time, being realistic. I saw a film the other day, we had it recorded, called Touching the Void. And it's about 2 mountaineers who were doing some incredibly dangerous climbing in the Andes. And it's the kind of story I just think amazing that anyone survives this. Anyway, the guy has a major accident. He's got a broken leg. He's fallen down the mountain. He's in a crevasse. He manages to somehow get himself out of this crevasse with a broken leg. And then he has to get himself down the glacier, which is full of crevasses. And then he has to get himself over a very rocky moraine, lots of rocks, lots of boulders, all with a broken leg. No food, no water. I mean, amazing. And he said he was really tempted to just kind of lie down and basically allow himself to die. But what kept him going is he would look at that boulder and think, I'm going to be there in half an hour. I'm going to be there in half an hour. So just little small goals. And he did survive. You know, it's an absolutely incredible story of endurance. But it was these little goals. If he'd thought, I need to get all the way back down to the tent, it would have just felt like too much. And he probably would have just lain down and died with a beautiful view of the stars, you know, a nice place to die. But he did manage to survive. You know, it's an incredible story. So, obviously, I'm not suggesting we should be in that kind of situation, but just manageable little goals. Okay, if you think, I'm going to meditate every day for a year, that might feel like too much. Maybe every day for a week, see if you can do that. And in a way, success and setting ourselves manageable things sort of feeds back into resolve, because we think, okay, yeah, I managed that. Yeah, I can do this actually. And another huge thing in resolve is remembering why you're doing it. Okay, I spent a year looking at what helps people establish and maintain a home practice. It's a subject that's a lot of interest to me. And again, what came up in the interviews and the research was, I'm getting something out of this, so I'm going to keep going. So, you know, if you start practicing more or doing whatever your resolution's going to be, I'm just using that as an example, you notice the benefits, and that helps you to keep going. That will strengthen your resolve. You think, oh yeah, I practiced every day last week, and I felt in a better mood. Maybe I slept better. You know, things just seemed clearer and easier. I know, I'm going to carry on doing that. So it really is small, manageable things, and reflecting on these benefits really strengthen resolve. It's certainly in my experience, and this came up again and again in the research that I did. And really experiment and see what works for you. You know, I often hear in my work people say, oh, it takes this many days to establish a habit, or oh, the best time to meditate is this time. Not necessarily. Okay, we are not all the same. Our minds are different, our bodies are different, our circumstances are different. See what works for you. You know, a lot of people love to meditate when they first wake up. Other people, that really doesn't work. You know, some people find a habit establishes quite quickly. Other times, they might take longer. So just reflect on what's working for you. We're going to do a bit of this in the practice that we're going to do shortly. Reflect, what works for me? And just finally, something to look at with resolve is, how am I talking to myself? Okay, there's this idea around that somehow we can shout ourselves into submission. We can beat ourselves into submission. I can tell you this really, really doesn't work. It is also a long way away from in fact it's the exact opposite of right intention, where we are being kind. We're not just being kind to others, we are kind to ourselves as well. Compassionate when we fall over and don't manage to do something, or feel that we failed or whatever. Kindness for others and kindness for ourselves is the same thing. Okay, it is not a zero-sum game where one person gets the biscuit and I don't get a biscuit. It's the same thing that we're cultivating. So just to share an example, when I was at school, I really, really hated physical ed, sports, PE. I hated it. And part of the reason I hated it, apart from I wasn't naturally very sporty, and I'm still not very naturally sporty, was that the teachers were really quite, you know, they'd shout at me and they'd make me feel inadequate all the time. And guess what? I ended up hating it and never wanted to do it again when I left school. Funny that. A few years ago, you know, fast forward 30 years, my partner and I started to go to a gym up the road, and the trainers there are completely different. They're very kind, they're very supportive, they're not mushy, they make sure we do the training. But there's never a sense that you're not good enough, you're not good at this, you know, you're not skinny enough, strong enough, fit enough. They're just really supportive. And guess what? We go every day. Okay, we go every, you know, now at the moment our living room is the gym, but you know, we've got our weights, we're there every day doing it. And see if you can be like that for yourself. Encouraging, supportive. Honestly, it really makes such a difference. You know, encourage yourself when you manage to keep to your resolve. Be kind to yourself, be compassionate with yourself when you don't. It will work so much better than trying to beat yourself into submission, which, honestly, it will always backfire. You know, I think this is becoming more known, but one of the courses that I teach is mindful self-compassion, and they're really big at looking at this inner critic, how we tend to think it motivates us. It actually doesn't motivate us. It actually makes us, I mean, it might motivate us for a very short period, but not in a very nice way. And there are, frankly, better ways of doing it, which are being kind. Okay, so just to recap, I've looked at right intention, which involves largely finding a skillful purpose, involves letting go, involves kindness, involves compassion, which of course show up across the Dharma teachings. And how to cultivate a skillful resolve. What do you want to do? What is the most wise thing that you can do to support yourself? And to experiment with what works for you. Okay, it may not be the same thing as what works for everyone else. Certainly a big thing for a lot of people, though, is coming together with others to practice, and of course this is a great opportunity for that. Other people like to, or same people, maybe, you know, stay in touch with other people who are practicing in another way. That's often a really big thing for keeping our resolve going. It's quite difficult all on our own. So I want to do some practice now. So I'm going to invite you to get settled in practice, and I'm going to drop in some reflection questions. It's quite... I first did this, I think, quite recently with Jack Cornfield. He was putting in these reflective questions into the practice. I really like this. And the way to work with a reflection question is, as you might expect, not to overthink it. But just to, so we'll spend about 10 minutes getting settled first of all, and then simply to hold that question. Just sort of say it to yourself, reformulate, translate into a different language if you prefer. Hold that question and see what comes to you. See what comes. And then we'll just keep holding and keep coming back to that same question. Because often by coming back to the same question again and again, deeper answers are revealed to us. And of course that's entirely optional. If you'd rather not engage with that, that's completely up to you. So let's just get comfortable for practice. Because it's fine to move, but it is good to start off comfortable. Making sure you're going to be warm enough with a blanket or whatever. Back is hopefully upright. If that's comfortable for you, you can lean back if that's not comfortable. And just feeling the ground beneath you is a fantastic way to start anchoring. Feeling perhaps your bum on the cushion or the floor. Getting that sense of support. And perhaps noticing as well your breathing, the other favourite anchor. And just letting the breath come and go. Seeing where it's easy to find now. And this is not a breathing exercise in that you're not regulating the breath. As soon as you're doing that, there's a bit of trying in there. There's a bit of controlling, and this is letting go. So we're just letting go into the natural movement of breathing. Yeah, the mind's going to wander. They always do. Yours probably already has. Mine has already. Just coming back. With kindness. We can cultivate kindness here. Letting go of thinking and kindness in how we bring it back. Here we are, right intention. If the mind is feeling in a difficult place, perhaps some compassion. I'm sorry, that's difficult now. Just really letting go of everything else to let the breathing come into the center of your awareness. This is an act of kindness for yourself, to give yourself this space. Simply sitting and breathing and coming back. Great way to anchor. Allow the mind some space to settle. Letting go particularly of ideas of getting it right, getting it wrong, being good at it, not being good at it. Just is as simple as breathing.